Right, hello viewers. Now, what are the best and worst gravel bike tech trends in 2025? Well, to find out, I went along to Europe's biggest gravel race, the Traka in Girona, just outside of Barcelona in Spain, to discover what the tech trends are right now. And I spoke to a load of people over the finish line, and in this video, I'll share 5 tech trends that stood out for me. And what I love about gravel racing right now, and gravel generally, is there are no rules, and it's a real wild west of bike setups. And that means there's a real myriad of bike setups, and it's fun to see how riders approach the same race from different approaches based on their different backgrounds, whether a mountain biker or a roadie or elsewhere. And every rider will no doubt tell you they have the best setup, but they can't all have the best setup, can they? So let me know what you think of the tech trends and setups in the comment section below. Firstly, Aero is everywhere. I've never seen so many Aero socks in my life. It's like a road race on dirt. So Aero is clearly very important, not just in road racing where the speeds are higher, but even in gravel where the speeds are, yes, lower, but Aero is still important. Which is kind of funny when you remember back to 2016 when 3T launched the Exploro, and everybody thought the idea of Aero gravel was crazy and they laughed at that bike, but that's not the case anymore. Who's laughing now? Because Aero is everywhere. Aero socks, I've never seen so many Aero socks in my life. Skin suits, of course, and Aero helmets. So those are 3 main sort of on-body tech trends I saw. And speeds on gravel may not be as high as they are on the road, but they're still going fast enough, the pros anyway, still going fast enough, well over 15 miles per hour where Aero really matters, for Aero to be that important. So minimizing the drag on the body with the full outfit of Aero kit. The other obvious Aero setup was narrow handlebars and angled in hoods, which Dylan Johnson, as you know, is a proponent. And you can see his video, Bike Check, linked above and down below in case you missed it. So quite a few bikes with very narrow handlebars, but not as many as I would have thought. Most riders had sort of 38 to 40 centimeter flared drop handlebars, and there were quite a few on extremely narrow handlebars, but most riders seem to have a fairly normal setup because while narrow in terms of handlebar width is more Aero, on gravel when you're riding off-road, especially a very technical, hardcore course like Traka, it's that balance of Aero on the flatter sections, but also handling agility and stability when descending through corners and single track. And narrow handlebars, in my experience, just don't handle through the corners as well as a wide handlebar. So yeah, narrow handlebars not as common as I might have thought because of that trade-off with handling and getting through corners and stuff. The other obvious tech trend is wide tyres. Tyres are getting wider, and in my 10 plus years of riding and testing gravel bikes, tyres have consistently been getting wider and wider. And it's just the same as I experienced in mountain biking back in the 90s and the 2000s. From 1.5 to 1.9 inch tyres to now 2.4 and 2.6 inch tyres, with a brief outlier to 2.8 and 3 inch wide tyres, which proves that wider isn't always better. There is a limit to how wide you can go. But at Traka, wide tyres were definitely an obvious tech trend, and quite a few people I spoke to were running 50mm wide tyres. So proving that 50 might be a new 45. I've been running 45 for the last few years quite happily, but now running 47 and 50, and that seems like the new sort of standard. But it does raise obvious clearance issues with bikes not designed around such wide tyres. And the other trend is, of course, mountain bike tyres. Again, Dylan Johnson is a fan of mountain bike tyres, done some really interesting testing that shows the benefits of mountain bike tyres, and quite a few riders had mountain bike tyres on their bikes. So a real mix of 50mm wide gravel tyres and 2 or 2.1 or 2.2 inch mountain bike tyres as well. But tyre size is definitely limited by the clearance on the bike. And there were some riders I saw with bike setups that clearly sacrificed clearance on a level I would not be happy with at all. And given the mud we encountered on a Sunday in a 100k race, which was filthy, biblical rain, it's clearance that would just cause issues in terms of mud and stone getting caught between the wheel and tyre and the bike grinding to a halt. And that's a real balance and compromise with tyre sizes, is how much clearance your bike has and how much clearance between the frame and rubber you are prepared to have. And there are actual official guidelines that bike manufacturers have to follow for safety reasons. And most riders will push beyond those limits if they're happy to compromise or sacrifice tyre clearance. The other tech trend I saw is mixed tyre sizes, which is the same as in mountain biking. If you mountain bike, you know that generally you have a chunkier, wider, stickier directional front tyre for cornering, grip and precision, and usually a faster rolling, narrower rear tyre. And we're now starting to see that on gravel bikes as well. And to be honest with you, I'm surprised it's taking so long. And it's probably to do with the road riding influence where you have the same size tyres front and rear, unless you go for Aero and have a narrow front tyre, but that's very rare indeed. So quite a lot of bikes with a mountain bike tyre up front, so 2.1, something like that. And then a smaller 45 or 50mm faster rolling tread on the back. So that's a trend I'm seeing becoming a lot more common, and one I'm going to try on my own testing very, very soon. The other tech trend is around gearing choice, which is down to personal preference, of course, 2x or versus 1x, to have or not have a front mech. And while this is no conclusive survey, I think most riders and most bikes had 1x gearing at Traka. And of those bikes, most were SRAM, and lots were either their Explore gearing with a 1046 cassette on the back and a 46 or 48 chainring on the front, which is just massive for the climbing on a Traka course. But then quite a few riders went to a mullet setup, so using a mountain bike cassette and rear mech with a 1052 cassette, and then pairing that also with a big chainring as well. And quite a few riders I spoke to on the finish line of the race admitted they were overgeared. They didn't have the low enough gears they needed for the steep climbs on the course. And gearing setup is all about gear range, and I spoke to a lot of riders on the finish line who readily admitted they were overgeared, didn't have the low enough gears they needed for the climbs on the brutal Traka course. And that is a really important point. It's all very well having a big, massive chainring that looks very imposing, but you need the gears that actually allow you to climb up the steep climbs. And when the climbs, like on the Traka, are steep and long, you can lose more time than you might gain on the flats or descent by having a big chainring. So it really comes down to having or doing your research on the course if you are racing, and knowing the elevation on that route and how steep the gradient of the climbs are, and gearing your bike in an appropriate manner and giving your bike the gears you need to allow you to spin up the climbs and not grind at 50 RPM. On the 1x versus 2x, I rode the Traka 100 on a 2x setup, Shimano GRX Di2, and I was both undergeared on the steep climbs thanks to that gear setup, and also in the conditions which were awful. Managing the front meg on the course going up and down was a real pain in the arse, and having 1x is just simpler. One less thing to worry about when you come into a sudden climb, go dump a load of gears. And the other issue I had was the conditions were so awful that the front shifting, as good as Shimano is, wasn't that reliable, and chain suck was a common issue throughout my race. So yeah, 1x in those conditions, just simpler, and also much bigger range available as well. So yeah, 1x I think is winning the battle for gravel racing in 2025 based on my experience. Not saying 2x is redundant, there is a time and place for 2x, but for me, racing the Traka, 1x is the way forward. The other tech trend is hydration packs, a big bladder of water in your backpack with a hose to drink on the move, because in a gravel race, you are really trying to minimize how much time you stop. There are feed stations, but if you stop, fill your bottle up, you're losing time and you're being dropped from that pack, that group you might be in. And if you're very lucky, you might have helpers, friends and family holding up water bottles at convenient places around the race. But if you're riding solo on your own, then you need to minimize how much time you stop. And lots of riders are now using a combination of water bottles on their bikes and a hydration bladder. And my approach, my personal approach, was to copy the pros and have 2 bottles of energy drink, high carb mix in the bottles on the frame, and then 1 litre of water in a backpack. So I had a mix of energy from my bottles, my gels in my pockets on the hydration chest straps, and then water in the back for that sort of mix of water and energy. So hydration packs, something I thought I left behind in mountain biking in the 2000s and moved to water bottles on the bike, are back in fashion. And we have lots of lightweight options on the market from lots of brands. I'll put links to some down below that offer a lightweight solution for carrying water on your body. And I'm trying a new one that isn't available yet, coming out very soon. And I found it very comfy actually. It wasn't heavy, it had 1 litre of water, all my gels in my pockets here, and it was comfy. Yes, I did sweat more through my back, but that's a trade-off for carrying water on your body. The other tech trend, and this is the most controversial, so I save it till last, is suspension on gravel bikes. Suspension 2.0, you might call it. Suspension forks on gravel bikes, nothing new. We had the Fox AX many years ago and the RockShot Rudy. And I've said in previous videos here on Just Ride Bikes that I think suspension on a gravel bike is a fantastic thing. Suspension with big tyres is a great combo and better than just big tyres on their own, because suspension forks have damping, it's controlled, and even though it's only 40 or 50 mil of travel, it still makes a big difference on rough, rocky terrain if you're riding at speed, so you can ride faster and have more comfort as well and less fatigue through your upper body. And while gravel has yet to catch on, Canyon were showing a new suspension fork on a Grail. A DT Swiss engineered suspension fork with 40 mil travel on what appears to be a new Grail. And I was actually riding the bike in the Traka, but due to embargoes, I can't talk about the bike at all. Sorry guys, but my experience of riding that bike with that suspension fork is, yeah, it's a game changer. It really is fantastic. Suspension and big tyres work together brilliantly. And while 40 mil of travel might not sound like much, it makes a massive difference when you're riding over washboard gravel, you're dropping down a rocky descent, the roots and rocks. It's both faster in those situations, you're in more control, so it's safer, and there's less fatigue. And my body felt fresh as could be expected after a 4-hour race. My arms, my wrists felt fine. My lower back, not so much. So suspension on gravel, yes, I know it works, it still works, but whether it catches on is another matter. I think that's because most people come to gravel racing are clearly coming from road racing as a background where they are weight obsessed. But if you're coming from mountain biking, you'll know, as I do, that suspension, front and or rear, makes a massive difference. Faster, smoother, more control. So that's why I don't think suspension on a gravel bike will ever really catch on in a meaningful way, because that roady background that most people bring to it, they're more worried about weight, even though we all know really that weight doesn't really matter at all. Aero and comfort and compliance and smoothness are more important. So yes, that suspension fork, fantastic. Can't wait to tell you more about it very soon. So that is a small tech trend, but I spoke to Freddie Overt, a gravel pro with Canyon, and he said gravel suspension for him is a game changer. His words, not mine, because his reasoning for saying that is he's a roadie, doesn't have amazing technical bike handling skills, and often on a technical descent, he's been dropped by his peers. But now with a suspension fork, he said it's raised him up from back of the pack to near the front. It's a skills compensator in a way. It's given him the ability to keep up with his peers who were dropping him before on technical high-speed segments. So that is, yeah, that sounds like a valid reason to go for suspension. So some really interesting tech trends from the Traka, from Europe's biggest gravel race. Aero is everywhere, suspension isn't everywhere yet. What do you think of these 5 tech trends? Which do you think are hot, which are not? Let me know by dropping a comment down below. And of course, let me know what gravel race you have planned. I'm going to Gralic at the weekend. If you're there, I'll see you there. But that's all for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you again very soon.